thank you for coming here. We're going to talk about from Sluggish to Speedy and how we're going to troubleshoot and improve MySQL CPU performance, and specifically with Django ORM examples. We're going to talk only about CPU, not about RAM, not about disk, so only about CPU. And because yesterday was the 1st of September, we're gonna have a quiz today. And the quiz rules are each one gonna keep track of his own points. At the end, you can come, tell me your points, and the winner will get a book which is called Nonviolent Communication. It is very relevant to the metaphor today. Okay, so the graph you see here is the DB instance size vs here. And the first quiz question is, who has ever increased his instance size instead of improving his code? So I do it all the time, that's how I work. And that's what we did year after year after year after year after year until we reached a problem. We reached the maximum possible RDS size, which is the managed database size on AWS. And now it becomes not only a cost issue, but also a stability issue, because we had ongoing rolling out of customers, and we could not have downtime. So today, we're going to give you the tools to do what a task force from our R&D did, which is in 3 weeks, we improved over 70% of the CPU usage. It's nothing magic, it's just very tedious tools and methods that we're going to talk about today. So I'm Daniel Balosh, I'm a principal software engineer at Ilios. I started there 4.5 years ago as the first employee, and I have 10 years of industry experience. Feel free to reach me out at LinkedIn or face-to-face. And Ilios, it's a startup company. It works in the mental health field, mainly with psychologists. The hypothesis is if the therapist will have more time and more mental freedom, he will put more time and effort on the patient. And we see it on thousands of therapists that the level of care is improving. So Ilios, at some product, transcribe the meeting. It uses AI and specific models to have insights and to have a smart way to fill up the meeting note. Okay, so for the metaphor. When a couple just started to dating, they don't just love each other, they also enjoy being around with each other. But as they mature and they bring kids, and they scale out the service called kids, they might bring a dog, stuff are not always fun. Some of the couples, they here to win, and they go together to couple therapy. Now, at Ilios, we started with a single monolith, a single server that used the Django ORM to talk to MySQL. After a few years, after we had more team members and more business, we scaled out to several services and to different schedulers and different tools, all using the same database. We did it for the reason of velocity. If everyone uses the same ORM, it is very easy to iterate, to test, and to move forward. But it's also hard to understand what causes the usage on the MySQL. That's why we didn't investigate it. We just scaled out. And we had a very strict rule. Everyone that writes to the database must use the ORM. So all of what you see on the right, which is both Airflow and the web services, are all importing the same ORM code and uses it. If you only read, you can do whatever you want. You can do raw queries, and you can use whatever framework you want to access the database. This is just for context. So, in other words, we got married to the Django ORM with all the good parts and also with all the bad parts. And we're going to go over the second part of the lecture of common problems and also the solutions. Okay, so now we're going to go together over 4 troubleshooting steps that will solve most of the problems, And every time we'll go to a couple therapy metaphor and back to MySQL, and this is going to be your quiz. The first step in therapy would be to have an anger log. An anger log is every time the couple fights, if they were more angry than 8 out of 10, they need to sit down and write what happened, why it happened, how much time it took them to cool off. Who can guess what is the equivalent of this in MySQL?
Words.
Exactly. The slow query log. We will go over it slowly. The slow query log, it shows you at what time the query took, who the user was, at what host, and how much the query time took. A query is only written to the slow query log if the query time is larger than a variable in the server that you can change. And it's going to show you also the log time. Here there is a caveat. If a query took very long to log, but was very fast, you will not see it in the slow query log. And we had this kind of problems. Then it will tell you how much row it sent back to the customer and how many rows were examined, and the actual query. This is the most fundamental tool to understand what slows down your database, and it's going to solve 60% of the problems usually. Now, for me at least, writing a test case that reconstructs the problem, it solves 60% of the problem. Once I have a debugger, usually I can fix the issue. So I'm going to show you for each tool how you can also do it in the ORM. And the example are using the Django ORM, but SQL Alchemy has similar features. So using connection queries, you can get a list of all the queries that happened and how much time it took. You can also reset it. So you can run part of the test code, reset the connection object, do something, and then access it again. Usually, I would not write this type of unit test ahead. It's too much cost. But if you fix a bug, you should first write a test to prevent degradation. Too many times, I fix an endpoint, and the same endpoint does problems later. If I don't add a test case, usually there is some business complexity behind this endpoint. Right? If you will not test it, it will happen again. The second step, after you have a specific fight, you will sit each one separate with a therapist, because if you sit together, you are yelling at each other, right? That's the whole point. And you will break down the fight, and you will understand exactly what happened, what were the triggers, what did the other guy said, or what you think he said, and also how you should approach the same fight next time. Who knows what is the equivalent of understanding a language at MySQL?
Execution plan?
Execution plan is a similar.
Explain,
analyze. Execution plan, I think it's on MySQL server, they call it like this, and explain analyze on MySQL. Maybe I'm not strong on the terms. So there are two tools, MySQL explain and analyze. The explain only shows you the plan, the theoretical plan, what is going to happen. And here you can see the UI from PyCharm. There are different UI that wraps this method, but you can also use it inside the shell. And it will show you each step, and it will also show you metadata. So if you have a condition, it will show you metadata on the condition and show you more values on it. At this step, usually I take the output and I go and I consult a professional. A professional DBA has a lot of context and things that we don't think about as developers. So it's very good to take the output, take the problem, and consult somebody that this is everything he does in life. And one more thing, the analyze is to run the query actually on the database, and it will show you the actual result. The explain is only theoretical, it's assumptions, and the analyze is the actual. But be careful not to run delete queries with the analyze. I did it, you need to go to the backup, you need to restore the data, it's less fun. So make sure only to do analyze on get or retrieve data. The second step, how to reach it from the ORM, you have a very nice explain method that does explain and give you the output. Great. So until now we talked about the slow query log and the MySQL explain and analyze. Now the couple is in a better place. They don't yell and fight all day, but it's not perfect yet. It's now like a death in 1,000 paper cuts. So they need to understand what is going on their daily interaction. So they will sit together, and now they can sit together in the same couch and talk about how their daily life looks like, how they behave when they come back from work, how they behave when the kids come home. This is a bit vague, but who can guess what is the equivalent of this in MySQL? Profiling. Profiling is might be, but I'm reaching for another stuff. Metrics is more metadata. So we have the general query log. By the way, there's more than one way to fix something, so you might say something wonderful, but I have this slide. So the general query log, it shows you the actual queries that ran, but you don't have any metadata on it. Meaning you don't know how much time it took, you don't know how much row it examined. You need to be careful when turning on the general query log about compute and about storage, because it's going to explode, and it did. Okay. So it's going to run all of your queries, so make sure you have enough storage for it, and about the cost also. This is not very helpful without additional tools above it, because you will just have a lot of log lines that now you need to analyze. And this is going to be the next step. Now, if you come to answer the question, how many queries does an endpoint or a code block does, there's a nice helper method on the test case class in Django, which is assert num queries. It lets you do the assertion of how much queries are actually happening. We use it throughout our code base, and usually in retro. We add some endpoint that does lots of queries, we improve it, and then we add it. It slows the developers a bit, because every time they change the code, they need to update this number. They run the test, it fails, it shows 17. Why 17? I don't know, I just write 17 here, but it's good because it's not 2000. Okay? And the last step is individual work. It's not always happening, but sometimes one of the partners go to individual work to understand the individual triggers and causes, because there might be a deeper work to be done. And there's not really like equivalent, so I'm gonna tell you. Here is an example for external tool on AWS. It's on the Cloudwatch, it calls patterns. There are many similar tools. Basically, it does text clustering, and it replaces recurring text with a placeholder, this symbol, and it shows you metadata. So how many event counts happened in the given time frame. Now, when we started investigated, we had a person to clean up the slow query log and a person to clean this input. And we saw that we have queries happening 1,000 times a second. And after we fixed it, we had queries happening 500 times a second. So it's nice. So those are the 4 troubleshooting steps. Using this, most of the problems are going to be fixed. Now, given a query, you know that you have a problematic query, you still need to map it to the code that caused this query. There are three main ways. The one is to use a custom logger. It is similar to the general query log. It's going to write everything, but you can choose to add your own metadata. At our case, I added who the caller is, what class it was, what line number, and how much time it took. And you can also put your own metadata. Which servlet it is, how much RAM, and whatever you want. The second option is to inject a correlation ID or a trace ID inside the general log. And then when at retro you investigate the general log, you can map it into your code base. There are several Python packages that does it. Specifically, I was afraid of side effect. I didn't use it. I prefer to use my own custom logger. And the third and best option is to have a working open telemetry, and it solves all of your problems in life. Unfortunately, I don't have it yet. I failed to deploy it several times, but it has an integration to the both to Django and to SQL Alchemy, and it will show you a beautiful graph of who called and what queries. It also does the clustering alone, so you can see what queries are repeating each other, and you can also query it. There's also a very good blog post which I wrote, by the way. So you have the link here. We also I check if there's a way to send the notes, so you always also have it there. Very good one. Okay. So now we're going to go over 3 problems and then 3 solutions. The first one is the full table scan. When we run MySQL explain, we see that there is a long query time and almost no data is being sent back. Only one row is sent. It's not too big, but it examines the entire table. And you can see that the query is very simple, but it has one assertion. Who can tell me how can we solve it?
Index.
Very good. Now, we tend to be we tend to be arrogant with index, and just to add index, I recommend, again, going to a professional and consult. There are different types of indexes. There might be conditional index, which will save a lot of storage. There might be a multi-column index, and sometimes the correct solution is to pre-process the data. So I suggest before just adding the index to stop, go consult your data team, and then do it. The second problem is the classical n+1 at the ORM. What happens here is that we have a table that references another table, and we want to show information from the reference table. In this example, on the patterns, we saw that on this placeholder, we have 600 requests a minute. This is not a theoretical thing. This is after the first time that we improve the code, right? So it happens. And what happens is that first you bring all of the IDs of something, in this example books, and for each books you go and you reach for the author. Who can tell me what is the solution for this problem?
Join.
Yes. Joining is the solution, and you have also in the ORM 2 ways to join. You have select related, which is the regular MySQL join, but it only supports foreign keys. If you have a many-to-many connection or a full table connection, you need to use the prefetch related, and the prefetch related does the joining in memory. It will get the IDs from each table and does the joining in memory. So you need to be careful about memory usage on prefetch related. Somebody broke production with it. That's me. Okay. Large query size. So by default, Django ORM will give you all of the columns of all the tables that you are joining on. So if you're joining a large number of tables, as we do, you will get lots of columns. And in this example, you have long query time, one row sent back, and with a lot of bytes sent. And this, for our example, the query was very optimized. It ran very fast, like on the search side, but it took a lot of time to return the data. So who knows what the solution here?
Specific.
Okay, specific fields. So there are 2 options here. One is to only bring the columns that you want. The other one is to say, I'm not bringing the columns now. I'm going to bring the columns when I need it. So the first query will only return your IDs, and when you access a column, an additional query will be done to bring this information. This is the difference between only. This is the same of selecting specific column, and defer, which will only bring the primary keys, and later you will do an additional query. If you really need to get the entire row, because that's the business case, and it's very large, and you need to iterate, you can limit the number of rows you return. By default, it is 1,000, and you can use the iterator and give it the chunk size. This is, by the way, if you're saving like big blobs of JSON because you don't want to use an additional technology to store JSONs, right? So this is a good tool to prevent memory problems. Okay, so those were the 3 problems. Now, anytime you have a doubt, you can get the raw query that the ORM gives you, and this is the .query method, and then you can run alone the MySQL explain on the production replica, right? Don't do it on the, I don't use the replica, but use the replica, and then you can optimize the query that you want. Now, commercial break. Ilios is looking for developers, surprise. We were looking for friendly people that are nice to work with, so feel free to reach me out. Okay, call to action. You should read the official documentation, not Stack Overflow and not ChatGPT. When you use a method, you should go to the official documentation and read it. There are some caveats there that it is important to know, and it also gives you context about how it should be used. The second one, next time you use your code, run analyze on it, understand it, and put in the calendar 2 months ahead to do it again. When you learn something, you think you know it, and then you forgot it. So you need to iterate a few times. Okay? It's important, because what is going to happen, and happens to me all the time, is you learn a tool, you say it's a great tool when production goes down, but then production goes down and you need to practice it. So it's better to practice it. The third one is you should get access to the slow query log of your company, and you should take the big ones and understand what is the product implication. Sometimes activation or retention are really performance issues. The customer will not tell you, but this is the root reason, and it might be a very easy fix to add an index instead of improving the general customer experience, right? And product will not know it unless you tell them. So this is a type of a bottom-up feedback that you as developers can bring and also give and bring value. So we went over the 4 troubleshooting steps, which is the slow query log, the MySQL explain analyze, the general query log, and the patterns. Instead of patterns, you can use something like performance analyzer or many other vendor tools that reads the general logs and give you the same results. And I've shown you how you can take a group of people in your company and improve in 3 weeks the CPU usage by 70% or 7% if your code is better. And that's it. Questions?
Q&A or Q&A?
Whatever you want.
What if I don't have a DBA in my company to consult with? Is ChatGPT good enough?
Come to me.
I think that's a good question. I'm a big believer in paid consultant. I don't do paid consultant, but you should get a good paid DBA, and you should get a good security guy if you don't have one, a good compliance guy. So find a good DBA and pay him.
I'm not the CEO.
So
Pay for
get
your
the
own
money.
pocket.
Get the money. Usually you will have some R&D expenses bucket, and if not, get one for the next quarter. It's important. No, really, it's important. Another question? QA? No. So I think we have time, right? Question is one? Okay. Okay, so I make a bonus if I speak too fast. I should have spoke more slowly, but okay. So another way to solve it is to use caching and you finish it, right? So most of the problem that you see here can be solved by application cache. You can use nested application and to hit the cache ahead and to have like webhooks. Every time an object change, I go and I calculate the cache again. It's working. I've used it on a very, very expensive queries, but it's add a lot of complexity to the troubleshooting side. Once you have a support ticket, you need to get the state of all the caches that you use to understand why the problem occur, and it's hard. So I specifically had several support cases when I said I don't know because of cache, and then I'm trying to reduce the use of caching as a temporary tool. Put the cache, it's okay, but make sure it's a tech debt and that you will fix it with actually improving the code. That's it.